What happens to nations that turn against Israel? History has the answer. What happens when a nation turns against Israel? It's a question most people don't ask out loud. But maybe they should, because history already answered it. Again and again. From the sands of ancient Egypt to the marble halls of Rome, from Babylon's golden towers to Hitler's war machine, there is a pattern, an unmistakable thread, a divine principle at work. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who curse you. Genesis 12:3. These were not empty words. This was the first recorded national covenant in history, and it didn't begin with laws, kings, or war. It began with a promise, a covenant between God and one man, Abraham. Over 4,000 years ago, in the quiet wilderness of the ancient Near East, God spoke to a wandering man with no land and no legacy, and he gave him both. God didn't just say, "I will bless you." He said something far more powerful. "I will bless those who bless you, and curse those who curse you." It was a spiritual law, one that reached far beyond Abraham, one that would affect kings, kingdoms, empires, and civilizations. Abraham became the father of Isaac. Isaac became the father of Jacob, and Jacob's name was changed to Israel. From that moment on, Israel was not just a family. It was a nation, a chosen people, a living sign of God's covenant on earth. And God made something else abundantly clear. Whoever touched Israel touched the apple of his eye. Zechariah 2:8. If you bless them, you touch God's heart. If you curse them, you provoke his justice. This was not symbolic. This was real. And the proof? It's written not just in the Bible, but in history itself. Egypt, the power that chose oppression. Let's begin with Egypt, one of the greatest civilizations in the ancient world. Pyramids. Gold. Science, a culture that believed their pharaohs were gods. But Egypt didn't begin as Israel's enemy. In fact, it started with blessing. During a famine, Joseph, a Hebrew son of Jacob, rose to second in command in Egypt. His leadership saved Egypt from starvation. Because of Joseph, the Hebrew people were welcomed as guests. Honored, protected. And what happened to Egypt during that time? It flourished, it prospered, it was blessed. But then a new pharaoh rose up, one who did not know Joseph. Exodus 1:8. And fear took root. The Hebrews multiplied. They became strong, and so Egypt turned on them. The guests became slaves. The blessed became broken. The pharaoh's decision was brutal. Enslave the Israelites, oppress them, kill their newborn sons, break their spirit. Egypt crossed a line, and heaven responded. God raised up Moses, a deliverer, a prophet, a man who would stand before Pharaoh and utter the words that still shake the world. "Let my people go." Pharaoh refused, over and over, and so came the plagues. Not 1.10. Water turned to blood. Frogs. Gnats. Disease. Darkness. Death. Each plague was not random. It was a direct blow to Egypt's gods, its economy, and its pride. Then the final judgment, the Red Sea. God parted the waters for his people to escape. Pharaoh chased them with his mighty army, and the sea collapsed. In one night, Egypt's greatest weapon, its army, was destroyed. From that day forward, Egypt was never the same. Its golden age faded, its gods forgotten, its greatness lost. And Egypt, though it still exists, has never returned to its former glory. Why? Because it dared to curse the children of Abraham. Babylon, the arrogance that burned God's temple. Next comes Babylon. If Egypt enslaved Israel, Babylon desecrated the sacred. The Babylonian Empire, under King Nebuchadnezzar, was the superpower of its day. Its walls stretched for miles. Its hanging gardens were one of the wonders of the world. Its kings thought themselves divine. But Babylon didn't just attack Israel. It invaded Jerusalem, destroyed Solomon's temple, and exiled the Jewish people. And worse, Babylon mocked God. Nebuchadnezzar forced Hebrew captives to bow to idols. His son, Belshazzar, committed one of the most blasphemous acts in history, drinking from the holy golden cups stolen from God's temple to toast pagan gods. That was the final straw. Suddenly, a mysterious hand appeared. It wrote glowing words on the palace wall. Mean, tekel, upharsin. No one could understand it until Daniel, a Hebrew exile, explained it. You have been weighed in the balance and found wanting. Your kingdom is finished. Daniel 5:27. That very night, Babylon fell. Without a battle, without warning, the Persians entered. The empire collapsed. Today, Babylon is nothing but dust and ruins. You can visit its remains in modern Iraq, crumbling bricks, forgotten walls, silence. The empire that burned God's temple and mocked his name is no more. Rome, the empire that tried to erase Israel. If Egypt oppressed and Babylon exiled, then Rome tried to erase. The Roman Empire ruled the world. Its legions conquered vast lands. Its emperors claimed divinity. It gave us roads, law, and civilization. But in 70 AD, under General Titus, Rome besieged Jerusalem. They starved its people. They burned the Second Temple exactly as Jesus prophesied. Not one stone will be left upon another. Luke 21:6. They slaughtered hundreds of thousands. Then, in 135 AD, Rome went further. It renamed Jerusalem to Aelia Capitolina. It renamed Judea to Palestine in an attempt to erase Jewish identity from the land. It banned Jews from their own capital. It was an act of defiance against God. But just as with Egypt and Babylon, Rome fell. The greatest empire the world had ever known crumbled not in one war, but from within. Corruption, plagues, barbarian invasions, division. By 476 AD, the Roman Empire was no more. Its ruins remain. Tourists walk its streets, but its power is gone. The same pattern again. I will curse those who curse you. Nazi Germany, the most vicious curse. If Rome was brutal, Hitler's Germany was monstrous. Between 1933 and 1945, the Nazi regime sought to exterminate the Jewish people. Over 6 million murdered men, women, children, families wiped out, culture destroyed. It wasn't just hatred. It was calculated, industrial evil. It began with propaganda, then laws, then ghettos, then gas chambers. And yet, the pattern held. Nazi Germany rose quickly. It had power, influence, military might. But within 12 years, the regime collapsed in horror. Hitler took his own life in a bunker. Berlin was in ruins. Germany was divided. And just 3 years later, In 1948, Israel was reborn. A nation that Hitler tried to erase rose from the ashes. And Germany? It paid the price for cursing God's people. Again, the covenant held. I will curse those who curse you. The blessing and the breaking. How modern nations rise or fall by their stance on Israel. The ancient pattern has never died. From Egypt to Babylon, from Rome to Nazi Germany, the principle remains unshaken. Nations that bless Israel rise, and nations that curse her fall. But this isn't just history. It's not limited to dusty scrolls and ancient ruins. The pattern is alive today in real time, in the modern world, in nations that still dare to challenge the people God chose. And perhaps the clearest modern proof of this principle is the British Empire. The British Empire, the rise through blessing, the collapse through betrayal. At the height of its power, the British Empire was the most expansive in human history. The sun famously never set on its territories. Its navy ruled the seas. Its language spread around the globe. And its economic influence shaped continents. And at a key moment in history, Britain chose to bless Israel. In 1917, during the chaos of World War I, British Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour issued a now famous declaration. His Majesty's government views with favour the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people. This was the Balfour Declaration, a political statement that opened the door for Jewish return to their ancestral homeland. At the time, Palestine was under Ottoman control. But with the war's end, Britain assumed control through the League of Nations mandate. And now they had a choice. Would they honor their promise? At first, they did. Jewish immigration increased. Settlements were built. Hebrew was revived. Hope returned to a scattered people. And Britain prospered. But then something changed. As tensions rose between Arabs and Jews, and as World War II loomed, Britain began to backpedal. In 1939, just as the Holocaust was beginning, Britain issued the White Paper, severely limiting Jewish immigration to Palestine. Jews were turned away. Refugees fleeing Nazi death camps were denied entry. Holocaust survivors were blocked from their ancestral home. In doing so, Britain betrayed the very promise it had made. The same empire that had opened the door now slammed it shut. And what happened next? Within a decade, the British Empire collapsed. One by one, colonies declared independence. India, Africa, the Caribbean, the Middle East. By 1948, the same year, Israel was reborn. The British Empire had begun its irreversible decline. Today, Britain remains a powerful nation, but it is no longer an empire. Its global dominance is gone. Its influence diminished. The pattern held once again. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who curse you. The United States, the greatest ally, but for how long? If any modern nation has experienced the blessing of supporting Israel, it is the United States of America. From its founding, the U.S. was built on Judeo-Christian values. The Bible shaped its laws. Many of its early leaders saw America as a new Israel, a nation under covenant with God. But something remarkable happened in the 20th century. America became Israel's greatest ally. In 1948, when Israel declared independence, the United States was the first nation in the world to officially recognize the new Jewish state. Just 11 minutes after David Ben-Gurion proclaimed Israel's rebirth, President Harry Truman signed the declaration. That single act of courage changed history. America opened its doors to Jewish refugees. It stood by Israel during war after war 1948, 1967, 1973. It sent aid, arms, and diplomacy when Israel stood alone. And what happened to America during this time? It became the most powerful nation on earth. Economic boom, military dominance, technological innovation, cultural influence. No empire in history had risen so fast, so far, with such global reach. Was it coincidence? Or was it covenant? Because while America blessed Israel, America thrived. But now something is shifting. In recent decades, political rhetoric has grown colder. Foreign policy has become more cautious, even hostile at times. In some administrations, support for Israel has wavered. Resolutions at the United Nations have been allowed to pass. Funding has been threatened, and anti-Semitism has begun to rise on campuses, in media, and even in politics. And so the question emerges, what happens if America turns against Israel? If the biblical pattern holds and it always has, then America's fate will follow its stance. Not because Israel is perfect, not because she never stumbles, but because God made a covenant, and He has not broken it. And when a nation touches Israel, it touches God's prophetic clock. Why does God care so much about Israel? To the skeptic, all of this may seem irrational. Why would the fate of empires hinge on one tiny nation, smaller than New Jersey, surrounded by enemies, constantly at war? Because Israel is not just a nation, it is a miracle. It is the only nation on earth formed by a direct act of God. It is the only people group that lost their land, language, and temple only to return after nearly 2,000 years. It is the only country whose borders were drawn by prophecy, not politics. And it is the only nation through which God chose to send His Word and His Son. Jesus was born in Bethlehem, not Boston. He taught in Galilee, not Greece. He died and rose again not in Rome, but in Jerusalem. Israel is God's timepiece, His covenant, His vessel, His stage for the final acts of human history. And Scripture is clear. In the last days, all nations will gather against Jerusalem, Zechariah 12:3. But those who stand with God's people will be preserved. This is not about politics. This is about prophecy. It's not about nationalism. It's about alignment either with God's covenant or against it. The nations are choosing again. We are now living in a moment of decision. The world is shifting. Alliances are changing. Nations are choosing their positions. And Israel once again stands in the center of it all. Some nations are doubling down on hatred, siding with terrorist regimes, denying Israel's right to exist, accusing her of genocide while ignoring the rockets that rain down on her cities. Others are wavering, sitting on the fence, afraid to offend, choosing neutrality over conviction. But the time for neutrality is ending. God is drawing a line, and nations, like individuals, must choose. Will they bless what God has blessed? Or will they oppose the people He calls His own? Because Scripture is not silent. In Joel 3, God declares that He will gather the nations and judge them for one reason: because they scattered my people among the nations and divided up my land. Joel 3:2. God does not forget. He does not overlook. He does not abandon his covenant. And so, the final question is not about Israel. It's about us. What side of the promise are we on? Will we bless or will we curse? Will we stand with what God has established or against it? Because the outcome has already been written. Egypt fell. Babylon burned. Rome crumbled. Nazi Germany was buried in ashes. The British Empire faded. And those who blessed Israel rose. Not because Israel is without fault, but because the God behind her never lies. The final warning, history, prophecy, and the choice we face now, the story is written. It has been told over centuries, repeated across generations, etched in scripture, and confirmed in history. Nations that bless Israel are blessed. Nations that curse Israel are fall. This is not superstition. It is not political rhetoric. It is not some tribal loyalty. It is covenant, and covenant is eternal. The God who spoke to Abraham beneath the stars still speaks today. He has not changed. His promises are not broken, and his eyes have never left his people. So we ask again, what happens to nations that turn against Israel? The answer is not hidden. It is everywhere. It lies in the collapsed walls of Babylon, in the dust of Pharaoh's chariots, in the ruins of Roman roads, in the cold ashes of Auschwitz, in the broken empire of Britain, in the trembling edge of modern America. Every time a nation rises up to oppose Israel, whether through violence, betrayal, or indifference, judgment follows. Sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, but always, because it's not just about land, or politics, or religion. It's about God's name. He said, "Whoever touches Israel touches the apple of my eye." Zechariah 2:8. This isn't casual affection. This is jealous love. This is covenant fire. This is the fierce protection of a father who remembers every exile, every wound, every child buried in foreign soil. Israel is not just a nation. It is a sign that God keeps his promises, a sign that prophecy is real, a sign that Jesus is coming soon. The prophetic clock is ticking. We are no longer in ordinary times. Everything is accelerating. Political tensions, global alliances, wars, rumors of wars, and at the center of it all, Jerusalem. The prophet Zechariah said, "On that day, I will make Jerusalem a cup that sends all the surrounding peoples reeling. I will make Jerusalem an immovable rock for all the nations." Zechariah 12:2-3. And what do we see today? Every peace deal, every war, every headline, every UN vote, it all comes back to Israel. Why? Because Jerusalem is not just the center of conflict. It is the center of God's story. It is where the Messiah walked. It is where he was crucified. It is where he will return. So the battle for Israel is not just geopolitical, it is spiritual. It is light versus darkness, covenant versus rebellion, God versus the kingdoms of men. And everyone, every nation, every leader, every citizen must choose a side. This is personal. Perhaps you think this doesn't concern you. You're not a politician. You don't write foreign policy. You live far from the Middle East. But this is bigger than politics. This is personal, because how you view Israel says something about how you view God. If you trust His word, you will honor His people. If you follow His Son, you will pray for the peace of Jerusalem. If you call Him Father, then you will not stand silent while His chosen are surrounded. And if your nation begins to turn away, you must stand firm. Like Ruth, who said, "Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God." Ruth 1:16, like Esther, who stood for her people for such a time as this. Like Daniel, who prayed from Babylon. Like Nehemiah, who wept for Zion, because God is watching, not just what governments do, but what you do. You can bless Israel. You can speak truth. You can pray. You can give. You can stand. And when you do, you align with the heart of God. The time is now. This is not a future issue. This is now, right now. Nations are choosing. Leaders are speaking. Decisions are being made behind closed doors and in open streets. Israel is surrounded. Terror groups plot her destruction. The world increasingly turns against her. And the church? Much of it sleeps. But you are awake now. You've seen the pattern. You know the truth. You've heard the call. So the question is no longer what happens to nations that curse Israel. The question is, what will you do now that you know? Will you stand silent? Will you sit on the fence? Or will you rise up and say, "I will bless what God has blessed. I will not be ashamed of God's covenant. I will stand with Israel even if the world walks away." Because in the end, the promise still stands. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who curse you. Genesis 12:3, and the nations are trembling. The time is short, and the Messiah is near. You've seen the pattern. You've read the history. You've heard the prophecy. Now it's your turn to respond. Like, share, subscribe. But more than that, pray, speak, stand. Bless Israel, and you will be blessed. Turn away, and your house will fall. History has spoken. Scripture has warned. And heaven is watching. The choice is yours, and the time is now.